Alright, so this is my review of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. Consider this a spoiler warning, and I'll try to keep this very short. Luckily, because this book doesn't leave much room for your own interpretation or thought, there isn't a big metaphor or allegory or lesson to be learned out of this. It's just a well written detective novel, and also it's not a whodunit. Well, in a sense it is, but there are 10 people, and this plot is also the premise, and it's introduced very early on in the book that there are 10 people who go to an island and they are killed off one by one. And then in the end, there is an epilogue and then a manuscript that explains how that came to be. But interesting for me in this book was the dynamics of the group as people were picked off one after the other. Again, since I've given spoiler warnings, I'll quickly go over the characters and the plot, at least the things that stood out to me. It was very clear from the beginning that one of these 10 people was the murderer and there was no third party involved. I, for the longest time, believed that it would be Dr. Armstrong because he was in close proximity to all the murders that had happened prior. But it was quite the shock to me when, uh, in the end, it turns out to be the lawyer. I did have an inkling that when he faked his death, it that maybe someone else was hiding his body for some reason, but I didn't think that it would be him. Anyway, I'm jumping through the plot quite a bit. Let's go to the characters. Another interesting thing that I want to mention is that the lawyer says that he chose his victims. Okay, I don't want to have too much of a gripe with this, but the victim selection is really, really random, and how he landed on these. Maybe the author could have spent some more time in telling us how he narrowed down these 10 people, but it's just in the epilogue or the manuscript, and that's how it is explained. I would have liked a bit more explanation there. But anyway, he gives an explanation of the order of the victims, that it ranges from so people who have remorse for their crime and the intensity of the crime, so to say, according to the lawyer, which I had found questionable. That someone who killed a child and betrayed the husband, let's say, in Vera's case, is left for the last, when I would consider some other crimes, let's say that of Philip Lombard, where he killed 20 tribesmen in Africa or something, to be a much more heinous crime than what Vera had committed, and many other examples in such cases. But okay, I'm just trying to find some things that I didn't like. But in other cases, I definitely like the plot, I like the pacing. It's a very short book. You could finish it in maybe a couple of days or 3 days. It's a page turner, definitely. It keeps you guessing at every uh, at the end of every chapter on who it could be. And okay, that's about the plot. People, it's set in the 1930s, I believe, so I couldn't relate to the customs that they were following. They were eating something called tongue. I don't, that doesn't sound very appetizing to me, and I don't want to know what that is either. But okay, they are all generally courteous to each other, even when the members of the party are being picked off and killed in such random fashion. I would assume that they would react more erratically. It's very interesting how Vera is portrayed as hysterical, and there is no one else who exhibits that particular trait in that group. Did no one ever freak out about this? How are you so calm about so many people dying in front of you? Is it a custom that you all have to sleep in your own bedrooms if you suspect each other, maybe sleep in a common area where you could see each other at all times. Why not do that? Is it just a 1930s thing? I would assume that that would be a logical thing to do, but maybe people wanted their privacy. I don't know what the issue was there. Anyway, there's one more thing that I have to complain before I go on. Sorry, everything else is positive about this book, but every time someone spoke, okay, sorry, two things. Why do you have to mention the name of the character in full every time? We get it, just call him the lawyer or the doctor. It doesn't have to be Justice Wargrave or Philip Lombard or Armstrong, or whatever his first name was. You don't have to mention that. Vera Clayton, just call her the secretary. You have established those characters, and that's how we remember it. I don't know why you have to mention the noun every time. Pronouns were introduced for a reason. Use it. Okay, and very quickly, another thing. Whenever someone spoke, you don't have to mention an adverb there. Someone spoke cautiously, or someone spoke slowly, Vera spoke frantically, or the judge spoke, I don't know, loudly, whatever that is. Why is the adverb so necessary in every single statement? We get it. And when two people are conversing, you don't have to go back and forth mentioning Blower said this, then Lombard said this, then Blower said that, and Lombard said that. Quickly. You don't have to do that. We get it that it's a conversation between two people. You can intersperse the two statements next to each other, and we probably would get the context. At least since this is written, as far as I know, after Sherlock Holmes came out, I didn't see such mistakes in literature, if I have to call it mistakes in prose, in that book or in those series of books. Whenever there was a conversation between two people, you knew who those two people were. You didn't have to make a statement saying who is speaking that particular sentence and what his tone or manner of speaking is. Some things can be left out to the reader to use his imagination to figure out. Anyway, sorry. Those are the two gripes that I have. Now let's get to the good things. Quick pace. So, like I said, it's a very short book. It keeps you guessing. Even though you know the plot, the nursery rhyme is very descriptive. You can almost figure out who is going to die next and in what way. But it's really interesting how, and uh, the author mentions it as well, that the twist doesn't come in the plot. You know what's going to happen. It's how it happened is what gives this story its color. I really liked that touch. I've never read something like this where usually you have a, a setup and a reward for that setup. Well, not too long ago, but in this case, the whole story ends and then everything is explained. But and by that time you have so many theories of your own. Luckily, I've been saved from spoilers for this book, so I went in blind. So I really could get myself to pause at every moment and think if something made sense or something was out of place. I would make a mental note of that. Usually in detective books, if there is an end of the chapter, some small details here and there are explained by that point. But here it's done at the end of the novel. It's a very good approach. I definitely appreciate that. In fact, initially, what I had assumed was that every murder in the book was done by a different person, which turns out is not the case. It's done, and I also assumed, for example, that some other people, let's say Emily Brent, her name was, I think, and then she knew about the lawyer's crimes and she wanted to get revenge for it, and so she killed him, is what I was assuming, and so on and so on. Let's say Philip Lombard killed Marston because he was jealous, or he was disappointed with how remorseless he was for his crimes, or it was committed by Vera because she's good with children, ironically, let's say, and she killed Marston, but that doesn't happen. Uh, so maybe some small changes in the plot would have made the story even more interesting, but we got what we did, and I'm definitely not complaining about that. It's a great story. And quickly, the last death, where he uses some contraption, the lawyer uses some contraption to kill himself, that was okay. Maybe people back then did actually find that believable or plausible, but it's far fetched, something that Christie needed to explain it away, and she put it like that, but highly improbable the way it turned out to be. But okay, again, is there anything else that I wanted to mention? I think that's about it. It's been a good while before I've read a good detective fiction novel, and this satisfied all the classic tropes. It kept the tension with us. It kept the fear and group dynamics, uh, and that definitely kept the story engaging for me as a reader. You should definitely take a look at it if you like Sherlock Holmes, if you like Poirot. It's definitely in that vein. Uh, don't expect, some crazy twists and turns, because again, this laid the foundation to detective fiction writing, and the story is from way back in the 1930s and it still holds up. Imagine if how this would have turned out if people there had cell phones, for example, or maybe communicated their feelings better, for lack of a better word. Much of this could have been avoided. I still can't believe all of them took the bait and went to the island to begin with. But okay, uh, much of all of this is obvious. Another small thing that I wanted to point out was that uh, about the China figures, there were 10 in the beginning and they kept dropping as the people kept dying. And in the end, there's a small quote that Vera says, I think, where she says that, "Oh, you're lagging behind, darling," and she kills two China figures and takes her own very good touch to keep three there to indicate that people were still alive. Very good touch. Loved it. That is my review. Thank you so much for listening.